Welcome to Money Making Minds YouTube channel. Today, we're embarking on a journey to explore the extraordinary minds that didn't just build successful companies. They fundamentally built the world we live in today. Every device you hold in your hand, every affordable good you buy, and every organizational structure that maximizes efficiency exists because someone refused to accept the status quo.
Right.
We are taking a deep dive into the minds of history's greatest CEOs and leaders.
That's right. And this is not a list compiled by, just looking at stock prices, though performance is certainly a factor.
Of course.
Our mission is to extract the most crucial, repeatable insights from the stories of 10 leaders who invented entirely new paradigms of commerce, manufacturing, and technology.
So what are we looking for exactly? What's the criteria?
We selected them based on 4 critical criteria that define true, lasting greatness. We're talking about legacy, impact, resilience, and sustained performance.
Okay, let's break that down. When we talk about legacy, we mean, did the culture, the systems, and the values they instilled thrive long after their direct involvement ended?
Exactly. And impact is the big one. I mean, did they change things far outside their own industry walls? Did they change society itself?
And resilience.
Yeah.
That has to be a huge part of the ability to navigate catastrophic failure.
Oh, absolutely. And finally, performance is the proof, right? You have to deliver truly extraordinary, decade-long results. It can't just be a flash in the pan.
What becomes immediately clear when you study this group is the difference between just a good operational manager and a great visionary leader.
A huge difference. The great ones fundamentally shift assumptions. They showed us that a bookstore, doesn't need to be a physical building.
Right, that's Bezos.
Or that computers belong in every home, and they should be styled beautifully.
Jobs.
And that complex innovation can be a reliable, organized process, not just some spontaneous event. And that's Packard and Coffin.
They think in decades when everyone else is totally focused on the next quarterly report. They obsess over the ultimate customer experience, often to the confusion of their own competitors. And crucially, they build cultures and organizational DNA that are designed to outlive them. That long-term focus is the ultimate moat.
The truth in their stories is deeply human, though. I mean, greatness isn't some innate quality. It's built one strategic decision at a time.
Right.
Often surviving failure, public humiliation, and the crushing weight of personal risk.
Right.
We're talking about leaders who were fired, who faced bankruptcy multiple times.
Or saw their rockets explode, yeah?
Or who saw their rockets explode repeatedly. That persistence is the common thread.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the ultimate modern visionary. The leader who proved that true breakthrough innovation happens at the intersection of technology and art. Steve Jobs.
Jobs is the quintessential modern revolutionary. And to understand the elegance, simplicity, and the intuition of Apple products, you have to look past the hardware and software. You have to trace his philosophy back to its very beginning. Specifically, a lesson learned from his adoptive father, Paul Jobs.
That's the famous anecdote about building the fence. It seems so simple, but it became foundational to his entire approach to business and design.
It did. It really did. Paul Jobs was a machinist and a craftsman. When they built something together, like a cabinet or a fence, Paul taught young Steve that even the back of the piece, the part no one would ever see,
The hidden part.
the hidden part had to be finished perfectly. He taught him that integrity and excellence aren't defined by what people see, but by your own internal standards. Even though nobody will know, Paul said, you should always finish the back.
And that single lesson is why, years later, Jobs would famously insist that the internal Mac circuit boards, hidden completely from the user, had to be designed with elegance and symmetry. I mean, most pragmatic business people would call that a massive waste of resources and effort. How do you even reconcile that obsessive cost with pragmatic profitability?
Well, it's not about profitability in the short term. It's about the deep, almost spiritual standard it sets for the entire organization.
Right.
When engineers and designers know that the standard of perfection applies to every hidden corner, it permeates the visible product. That pursuit of perfection, even in unseen components, is what allowed Apple to achieve that magical user experience that competitors just couldn't replicate.
It created the feel of quality.
It absolutely created the feel of quality.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Connecting his success to these seemingly impractical pursuits. His time at Reed College, which he famously dropped out of, seems almost irrelevant on the surface.
Yeah.
But he stuck around for 18 months, sleeping on friends' floors, auditing classes, just because he was curious.
Yes, the seeker's detour, as you call it. The most famous class he audited was calligraphy,
Right.
the art of beautiful handwriting, including learning about serif and sans serif typefaces, spacing, and all the artistic subtleties of typography. He recalled later that it had, zero practical application at the time.
But 10 years later, that seemingly useless artistic pursuit directly led to the Macintosh being the first computer with beautiful, sophisticated typography.
Absolutely. When he was designing the Mac, Jobs demanded that it include multiple proportionally spaced fonts. It was the first computer to do so.
Wow.
If he hadn't dropped in on that one single calligraphy course, the Mac would have looked like every other utilitarian, blocky computer of the time. This simple artistic detail was actually a massive competitive advantage.
And it established the Mac as the machine for creatives, right? It drove the whole desktop publishing revolution.
It did. And you can't overlook the profound influence of his spiritual journey, his trip to India, and his immersion in Zen Buddhism. That wasn't just a personal choice. It was foundational to the entire Apple aesthetic.
So how did that translate into, a computer?
It provided the philosophical ballast for the design. He came back profoundly influenced by the Eastern emphasis on simplicity, on intuition, and the search for essential perfection, which means eliminating the unnecessary.
Okay, so the clean lines, the absence of clutter.
The focus on the single perfect button that traces directly back to his Zen practice. He proved that the intersection of technology and the liberal arts creates products that don't just work, but feel intuitive and beautiful.
The first revolution, of course, was the founding with Steve Wozniak on April Fool's Day in 1976. But the true commercial breakthrough was the Apple II in 1977.
The Apple II really created the entire personal computer market
How so?
because it became the platform for VisiCalc, which was the first spreadsheet program. This gave businesses a compelling reason to buy a computer, moving it from a hobbyist's toy to an indispensable business tool.
But Jobs was already pushing beyond that with his vision of the insanely great Macintosh. It had the graphical interface and the mouse concepts he seized upon after visiting Xerox
It's an engineering marvel.
But in 1984 it was too expensive, too slow, and sales were disappointing.
And that failure set the stage for one of the most publicly traumatic events in modern business history.
His firing in 1985 by John Sculley, the CEO he himself had recruited from Pepsi.
Right. Imagine being fired from the company you started at age 30 due to a power struggle. It's just brutal.
It must have been devastating. He described it later as feeling like he'd been punched in the gut, a very public, catastrophic failure.
Yet years later, he recognized it as his greatest education. Being fired freed him from the burden of leading a giant established company.
So he could be a beginner again.
He was able to re-enter his beginner phase, which propelled him into his most creative period of entrepreneurship and learning. This is a critical lesson in resilience. Failure can be tuition for your greatest success.
And that creative period, his time in the wilderness, was built entirely on two perceived commercial failures that created Apple's entire future foundation.
Precisely. First, there was NeXT. Commercially, it failed dramatically. It was an expensive niche computer that just sold poorly.
So what came out of it?
Well, what did NeXT build? They developed a highly advanced, object-oriented operating system and programming tools that were years ahead of their time.
And when Apple bought NeXT to bring Jobs back,
that operating system became the core foundation for Mac OS X and consequently iOS. It was a failure that literally built the software stack for a trillion-dollar company.
The second was Pixar. Jobs poured $50 million of his own fortune into that company.
Just keeping it afloat for years, hemorrhaging cash until Toy Story hit in 1995.
And Pixar was, in a way, his leadership training.
It really was. Working with that unique creative culture of animators, he learned how to inspire excellence without the tyranny he sometimes displayed at early Apple.
Right?
He learned invaluable lessons about storytelling, organizational culture, and inspiring highly creative people. The leader who returned to Apple in 1997 was far more effective, mature, and culturally astute than the one who left in 1985.
That return was one of business history's greatest comebacks. He immediately cut 70% of the product line.
An incredible move.
Convinced Bill Gates to invest $150 million and launched the colorful iMac in 1998, returning Apple to profitability. But the real legacy lies in his obsession with the integrated ecosystem.
That is the ultimate secret sauce vertical integration. The iPod, launched in 2001, wasn't just a music player. It was training for system design.
What do you mean by that?
It was a seamless, closed-loop experience. You had the hardware, the iPod, combined with the software, iTunes, combined with a service, the iTunes Music Store. This created an experience competitors who focused only on one of those elements just couldn't touch.
And that training culminated in the iPhone in 2007. I still remember watching that keynote.
The iPhone was a paradigm shift disguised as a press conference. He announced 3 revolutionary devices, an iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator, then revealed they were all one device.
He defied industry skepticism completely. I mean, the tech establishment insisted on physical keyboards for business users.
Oh, yeah. Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer famously laughed. He predicted the iPhone had no chance of market share because it was too expensive and didn't appeal to business users.
That laughter has become a monument to being catastrophically wrong about the future.
It really has. It proved that Jobs was looking years ahead, recognizing that the consumer market would ultimately drive the business market, not the other way around.
The iPhone didn't just succeed. It created the multi-trillion-dollar app economy, changed how the world communicates.
And arguably created more aggregate economic value than any single product in human history.
So, if we distill his legacy, what are the core lessons for today's leaders?
I think there are 3. First, the power of focus. Jobs famously said, "I'm as proud of what we don't do as what we do." When he came back in '97, he imposed that 4-box matrix.
Right. The consumer desktop, pro desktop, consumer portable, pro portable.
And he cut everything that didn't fit into those 4 categories, 70% of the products to redirect energy and resources. That level of discipline is it's so rare.
It's easy to say focus, but cutting 70% of your products when you're nearly bankrupt takes extreme courage.
It does. Second, the necessity of vertical integration controlling the whole experience from the chip to the software to the storefront.
And third,
Leading with vision, not consensus. Customers didn't know they wanted the iPhone or the iMac or the iPad until he showed them what was possible. Great leaders don't follow market research. They create the market itself.
that focus on creating a market, on seeing the future before anyone else, is a perfect philosophical bridge to our next subject. Jeff Bezos, the architect of the everything store.
Bezos' story begins not in a garage, but in the passenger seat of a car. It's 1994. He quits a lucrative vice president job at a hedge fund, D.E. Shaw.
And tells his boss he's going to start a company selling books on this new thing called the internet.
He wrote the initial business plan during that cross-country drive from New York to Seattle, driven by this stunning statistic that web usage was growing at 2,300% per year.
And that growth rate became the irresistible force. The mental exercise that convinced him to make that leap, leaving his security and salary behind, was the regret minimization framework.
Explain that framework to us. It seems like a powerful tool for making these huge life-changing decisions.
It's highly effective. Bezos imagined himself at age 80, looking back on his life. At 80, would he regret trying to participate in the internet revolution and failing? Or would he regret not trying at all? He realized that the pain of inaction, the regret of missing the greatest technological shift of his era, would be far greater than the risk of failure. That clarity made the decision instantaneous.
So they chose Seattle, partly for talent, partly because the Inagram Book Group, a huge distributor, was nearby. And Amazon literally began with desks made from doors.
Right. That initial extreme frugality became a core cultural value.
Yes, and that frugality was built around the overriding cultural principle, customer obsession. Bezos defined success not by sales, but by the relationship with the customer. He famously defied conventional business wisdom by obsessing over the customer, not competitors or short-term profits.
And the prime early example of this was allowing negative customer reviews. Publishers and retailers were furious. They wanted the site to look perfect. Why did he insist on allowing negative feedback? Because it built trust. He understood a deeper truth. We don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help customers make purchase decisions.
That's a powerful distinction.
It is. If a customer saw a mixed bag of honest reviews, they trusted Amazon more, even if they decided not to buy that specific book. That radical honesty built unmatched long-term loyalty.
And that commitment to the initial scrappy mentality is captured in his obsessive maintenance of the day one culture.
Day two is stasis, followed by death. It's an incredibly powerful metaphor. Day one means maintaining the agility, speed, innovation, and direct customer focus of a startup.
Which is exceptionally difficult to maintain as a global trillion-dollar enterprise.
Right, which is why he pushed constant reorganization and relentless questioning of internal processes. He even named one of their largest corporate buildings Day One. It's a constant reminder against complacency.
Despite the customer focus, Bezos faced immense criticism, especially during the 2000 dot-com crash when the stock just dropped like a rock. But even before that, he was making strategic bets that Wall Street thought were completely suicidal.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime, launched in 2005, is arguably one of the three most brilliant strategic decisions of the 21st century. Analysts thought $79 for unlimited 2-day shipping was insane.
Why? What was their logic?
Their logic was, if Amazon pays shipping costs for frequent shoppers, they will lose money on every frequent shopper. It seems like a mathematical certainty.
But Bezos saw it differently. He saw the customer psychology.
He did. He saw it as a powerful loyalty program designed to eliminate the single greatest friction point in online shopping. That mental calculation about shipping costs.
That moment where you're like, is it worth $5 for shipping?
Exactly. That $79 subscription essentially freed the customer to shop without thinking twice. That freedom increased shopping frequency and, critically, increased the customer's lifetime value dramatically.
The result was spectacular. Prime members shop much more frequently, across far more product categories, and are deeply resistant to shopping anywhere else.
Prime became Amazon's economic moat. It drives tens of billions in subscription revenue today, but more importantly, it makes Amazon the default choice for millions of American households. It was a long-term investment in loyalty, sacrificing short-term revenue on shipping fees for overwhelming long-term customer lock-in.
And his second revolutionary bet, Amazon Web Services, AWS, was born almost accidentally from an internal IT crisis.
That's the most fascinating part of the story. Around 2003, Amazon realized its internal infrastructure was a total mess.
Okay.
Every team was building its own non-standard, inefficient servers and storage, often just sitting idle. So Amazon engineers built scalable, reliable computing services for Amazon's internal teams.
And the light bulb moment was realizing that the scalable, reliable computing they had created to solve their own problem was a problem every single internet company faced.
Exactly. The radical idea was selling that infrastructure storage, computing power, messaging to external developers. Most CEOs would have dismissed this as far outside their core retail business.
Right, stay in your lane.
But Bezos understood that this was a fundamental capability.
And what did AWS change for the tech world?
It shifted computing from a massive, risky, upfront capital expenditure CapEx to a flexible, pay-as-you-go operating expense, or OpEx. Meaning if you were a startup in 1999, you needed, say, $1 million to buy servers and just hope your idea worked. With AWS, you pay $100 a month and you scale as you grow. This democratization of infrastructure fueled the entire modern startup boom.
And now AWS is the crown jewel of Amazon.
Absolutely. It powers an estimated 40% of the internet, with over $90 billion in annual revenue and margins exceeding 30%.
So what does this all mean for leaders today? What are Bezos's core non-negotiable principles?
3 things stand out. First, the compounding power of long-term thinking. Bezos famously says if you're willing to invest on a 7-year time horizon, you're competing against a fraction of people because most are focused on the next 3 quarters.
Right.
Second, you must be comfortable with being misunderstood. If you innovate, you will be criticized. Prime, AWS, Kindle were all heavily criticized at launch. Misunderstanding is often a prerequisite for doing something truly novel.
And the third lesson relates to process, the insistence on rigorous, written narrative memos.
This is a fundamental organizational tool. Bezos banned passive PowerPoint presentations because they allow for superficial, high-level thinking.
I can see that.
Instead, leaders have to write these detailed, coherent 6-page narrative memos describing their proposals. At the start of every meeting, everyone just sits and reads the memo silently.
Really? In the meeting?
In the meeting. It forces clear articulation and rigorous thought. If you can't articulate an idea clearly and in depth through writing, Bezos believes you don't understand it well enough to execute it.
That focus on systems and operational rigor provides a perfect transition. We're moving from the digital architect to the operational architect. Sam Walton, the man who fundamentally changed retail in the 20th century.
Walton's story of resilience starts with a painful foundational loss. In 1950, he had built this highly successful Ben Franklin franchise store in Newport, Arkansas. He had the best location and the best sales.
But the landlord wanted the successful spot for his own son.
Precisely. Walton's lease wasn't renewed and he lost his business entirely. He had poured years of effort into that store only to have it taken away by a simple legal document.
Wow.
That painful, traumatic failure taught him two invaluable lessons. Never get comfortable and never depend on external factors like a favorable lease. He realized he had to build a business so focused on value that customers would travel to find him, regardless of location.
So when he launched the first Walmart Discount City in 1962, the entire retail establishment just laughed at him.
Because conventional wisdom dictated that discounting required urban density, you needed massive foot traffic, like in the suburbs or large cities, to achieve the scale necessary for low prices.
So Kmart and Target were focusing on those large, high-density areas.
They followed the money. But Walton decided to build in tiny, underserved small towns places with populations of 5,000 to 25,000 people.
That was his stroke of genius, the contrarian strategy.
It was. He realized small-town America was massively underserved and paid higher prices than city dwellers. Individually, these towns were small, but collectively, by building a dense cluster of stores in rural areas, he achieved massive scale while simultaneously avoiding direct competition with the giants.
He grew rich where others wouldn't even bother to compete.
Exactly. His true genius, however, wasn't just in pricing or location, it was in operational efficiency and distribution, which made the low-price model possible and sustainable.
Right, the logistics advantage created an unstoppable cost structure. This is the difference between strategy and execution.
When the company had fewer than 30 stores, Walton took a radical step. He invested in building his first distribution center in Bentonville, Arkansas.
That was highly counterintuitive at the time. Why would he build massive infrastructure before he had massive scale?
He was building capacity for the future. Most retailers relied on third-party wholesalers and waited until they were national giants to control distribution. Walton invested early so he could buy directly from manufacturers in bulk, eliminate the middleman, and control inventory flow from the start.
So that early investment in infrastructure was a bet on logistics as the competitive weapon.
And he coupled that infrastructure with technology much earlier than his peers. He implemented computerized point-of-sale systems back in 1970 and, incredibly, installed a satellite communication system in 1983 to instantly link stores, distribution centers, and headquarters.
He was obsessed with data flowing instantly.
Completely, and this technological backbone enabled the famed cross-docking system.
Okay, let's unpack cross-docking in detail, because this is the operational breakthrough that fundamentally defines Walmart's cost advantage.
Okay, so traditional warehousing involves goods arriving, being checked, labeled, placed on shelves in long-term storage, retrieved later, and then shipped.
Right. A lot of steps.
That expensive middle-step storage and retrieval ties up capital and time. Cross-docking eliminates it almost entirely. Goods arrive at the distribution center, and within hours, often less than 24, they are sorted and moved directly from the incoming dock to the outgoing dock and onto the trucks destined for the stores.
So Walmart's inventory costs just plummeted because the goods weren't sitting in a warehouse becoming expensive assets, right?
Correct. It dramatically reduces inventory costs, it accelerates product turnover, and it ensures shelves are stocked better than competitors. It turns superior execution, moving goods faster and cheaper than anyone else, into the ultimate, unbeatable cost advantage that allowed him to promise those low prices every day.
Beyond the systems, Walton also built a highly distinctive culture based on treating employees as associates.
He truly believed that his business was a partnership. He instituted profit sharing and stock purchase plans to give associates an ownership stake in the company's success.
And his reasoning was pragmatic, right?
Completely.
Yeah.
He believed the way management treats associates is exactly how those associates will treat the customers. That alignment of interests was revolutionary.
And the famous Saturday morning meeting, complete with the often silly Walmart cheer, that sounds kind of counterintuitive for a massive corporation.
They were far from silly. Those meetings were fundamental cultural anchors for transparency, energy, and accountability. Walton insisted on transparency in sales numbers and continuous competitive comparisons.
And he was always in the stores.
Always. Even as a billionaire, he would drive his pickup truck, fly coach, and constantly visit stores, talking directly to associates, asking them for ideas, and implementing them. That humility, combined with intense competitive spirit, was cultivated every single Saturday.
The result was explosive growth. From $44 million in 1970 to $55 billion at his death in 1992. But as we analyze this legacy, we have to acknowledge the complex reality,
Yeah.
cost of this efficiency.
Absolutely. While Walmart brought unprecedented low prices and vital employment to underserved rural communities across America, the consequences for local Main Street businesses were often devastating.
They just couldn't compete.
No. Walmart faced fierce criticism for allegedly driving out local hardware stores, pharmacies, and grocers that simply couldn't compete with the perfected operational efficiency of Walton's system. And the persistent issues around low wages and labor practices also remain a complicated part of the legacy.
This shows that great innovation often comes with significant societal trade-offs.
It does.
So if we pull back, what are Walton's core lessons for modern leadership?
3 things. First, study competitors obsessively. Walton literally crawled under competitors' shelves to measure display space and pricing. Yeah. Second, invest in infrastructure early. Build the logistics capacity before you need it, because logistics is the ultimate competitive moat. And third, strategy is cheap. Superior operational execution is everything.
Now we shift gears entirely to the pioneers, who fundamentally revolutionized how products are made and how workers are treated, starting with Henry Ford.
Ford didn't invent the car, but he democratized mobility. Before the Model T, cars were expensive toys for the wealthy, often costing the equivalent of a middle-class house.
But Ford's goal was to build a car for the great multitude, so low in price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one.
And his invention, the moving assembly line, was the key to unlocking that mass affordability.
It was a manufacturing revolution based on standardization and relentless optimization.
Introduced in 1913, the moving assembly line reduced the production time for a chassis from 12.5 hours to a staggering 93 minutes.
Wow.
This unprecedented increase in efficiency allowed Ford to drop the price of the Model T from $850 down to $260 by 1925. He proved that mass production could deliver quality at unprecedented affordability, making the automobile accessible to the American middle class.
But the truly strategic move, the one that historians argue changed American capitalism itself, was the revolutionary $5 workday announced in 1914.
That move seemed economically insane to competitors. Ford was paying $5 a day, more than double the prevailing average wage in the automotive industry.
Rivals accused him of foolishness.
Right. They even accused him of injecting Bolshevik poison into the economy.
But the high wage was not just altruism. It was brilliant supply chain and labor management.
Exactly. And before the $5 workday, Ford faced a monumental crisis. Labor turnover was astronomical, reaching 370% annually.
That's unbelievable.
Imagine the cost of training 3 to 4 new workers for every single position every single year. The high wage dramatically reduced turnover, saving immense training costs and increasing productivity because workers were now motivated and committed to staying.
So it was just good business sense.
The immediate economic benefit was a stabilization of his labor force, justifying the wage increase purely on operational efficiency.
And critically, it created his consumer market.
And that's the long-term genius. He realized that his workers were also his potential customers. By giving them the highest wages in the industry, he created a class of people, the working class, who could now afford the Model T.
He established the core principle that workers are also consumers whose purchasing power drives broader economic growth. He essentially created the modern American middle class.
He did. Yet, for all his genius in production and labor management, Ford had a colossal strategic failure: stubborn resistance to change.
That is his tragic flaw, a failure of vision due to misplaced pride. He became so convinced the Model T was the perfected solution that he refused to innovate, famously insisting customers could have any color that he wants so long as it is black.
That rigidity allowed his competitors, specifically General Motors under Alfred Sloan, to surpass him entirely by adapting to consumer demand for choice, different models, and, crucially, credit financing. Ford's empire nearly collapsed because he refused to believe the customer might want something new.
If Ford represents the operational pioneer, the story of Bill Allen, the reluctant lawyer who saved Boeing, shows us that courageous leadership is about betting the entire existence of your company on thoughtful risk.
Allen took the helm in 1945. Boeing, previously sustained by World War II military contracts, was facing a collapse of defense spending.
So he faced an existential crisis.
Right. And Allen, a corporate lawyer who admitted feeling unqualified to run an engineering firm, had a choice: diversify into kitchen goods or focus entirely on aviation despite massive losses on the early Stratocruiser commercial plane. He chose aviation.
And then he made the biggest bet in aviation history up to that point, committing to the jet age.
The development of the Dash 80 prototype, which became the iconic 707. Conventional wisdom said commercial jets were too expensive, too complex, and too fuel-hungry to be viable. Allen committed $16 million, Boeing's entire reserve, and arguably its very existence, to build the prototype without a single customer order.
That demonstrates a level of profound courage. He was betting not just the company's cash, but the jobs of thousands of employees.
That's true leadership. He knew they couldn't wait for customers to ask for a jet. They had to create the future and lead the customer there. The 707 succeeded, launching the jet age, shrinking the world by cutting transatlantic travel time in half, and cementing Boeing's global leadership.
But he wasn't done. He made a second, even larger bet with the 747 jumbo jet.
A staggering $1 billion bet in the late 1960s, a project so massive it required him to personally guarantee some loans to finance the required construction of the world's largest building by volume.
The Everett factory.
The complexity of developing the 747 was immense, requiring new alliances and radical production techniques. He was once again betting the farm, knowing the stakes were civilizationally important, democratizing international mass travel.
Allen's enduring lesson is that great leadership requires profound courage and judgment, proving you don't need to be an engineer to lead engineers.
But you must have the capacity for calculated, thoughtful risk-taking.
Let's turn now to the leaders who built the systems that allowed the entire tech industry to succeed. The management pioneers, David Packard and Charles Coffin. These names are less famous than Jobs or Bezos, but their influence on organizational structure is just as profound.
David Packard and Bill Hewlett, starting in that famous Palo Alto garage, didn't just build instruments. Packard built the soul of Silicon Valley. His core legacy is the corporate culture, the HP way.
Which was a radical departure from traditional industrial management in the 1950s.
Absolutely. It was built on trust and decentralization. Packard pioneered principles like eliminating time clocks, instituting an open-door policy, and setting objectives over rigid rules. And the most famous practice was management, by wandering around MBWA.
So he formalized the idea that managers should not lead from an isolated office, but should actively be out, talking to the people actually doing the work, the engineers, the technicians, the assembly line staff.
Exactly. It ensured that management stayed connected to the reality of the shop floor and to the early signs of innovation and bottlenecks. Packard's philosophy was simple. If you treat employees as intelligent, motivated partners,
give them trust, autonomy, and respect,
they will respond with far greater innovation and loyalty than if you treat them like interchangeable cogs in a machine. The HP way provided the template for modern employee empowerment that defined early Silicon Valley's unique culture.
And then there's Charles Coffin, the forgotten genius who truly invented the modern multi-industry corporation.
Coffin was a former shoe salesman who transformed Thomas Edison's chaotic collection of companies into General Electric. Edison was a brilliant inventor, but a terrible manager.
Right. His operations were haphazard, relying entirely on his personal genius and intuition.
And Coffin fixed that fundamental flaw. He proved that systematic management and professional structure were superior to relying solely on a single founder's charisma.
He pioneered systematic research and development, R&D.
He did, establishing the first true corporate research laboratory in 1900. He shifted innovation from being a spontaneous, inventor-driven event to being a rigorous, organized, and repeatable process. Coffin also established professional management development and rigorous financial controls, creating clear lines of authority and accountability.
He essentially created the enduring template for how massive, diversified industrial companies operate today.
Coffin's lesson is that organizations built on systems, process, and professional structure endure, while organizations built solely on a founder's unique personality and genius collapse when that founder leaves or loses interest. Coffin provided the essential management framework that allowed GE to become one of the most reliable and long-lasting industrial giants in American history.
That brings us to our final section. The modern disruptors who used capital, technology, and transformative culture to reshape global industries in the past few decades.
And we have to start with the ultimate capital allocator, Warren Buffett. His success is built not on invention, but on discipline, clarity, and the relentless power of financial compounding.
His foundational philosophy, patient capital, was apparently forged by a painful first lesson he learned as a young investor, selling his City Service shares too early.
That mistake stuck with him forever. He bought shares at $38, sold them at $40 for a small profit, only to watch them soar to over $200 later. It taught him the incredible cost of impatience.
And Berkshire Hathaway's strategy relies heavily on using insurance float.
Right. The essentially free temporary cash collected from premiums before claims are paid. He uses that to invest in wonderful companies at a fair price and hold them for decades, allowing compounding to work its geometric magic over time.
That use of insurance float is incredibly strategic because it's capital he gets to deploy that doesn't belong to him without paying interest on it.
It creates a massive decades-long advantage. While other companies need to borrow money or raise capital for investment, Buffett has this ever-replenishing pool of essentially free, deployable money.
He combines that structure with immense discipline.
Right. Focusing only on businesses he truly understands and resisting the urge to chase fads or high-tech speculation.
And his legacy of integrity and transparency is just as critical as his financial acumen.
Buffett's annual letters to shareholders are a cultural phenomenon. They're a masterclass in honest communication. He doesn't obscure mistakes. He explains what he learned, often using folksy, clear language.
And that consistent transparency and intellectual honesty created a trust with investors that compounds over time.
Exactly. Trust, in his view, is the ultimate competitive advantage.
Now, for a leader who is the polar opposite of Buffett in style, yet equally influential, Elon Musk. He is simultaneously forcing three of the world's most complicated, capital-intensive industries, automotive, spaceflight, and energy, into radical transformation.
Musk approaches problems from first principles thinking. He doesn't look at how things are done. He strips the problem down to its fundamental components, physics, math, materials, and asks how they must be done, ignoring conventional industry wisdom.
And that audacity is what drives his impossible trio. Let's start with Tesla. He proved electric cars could be superior, desirable, and viable, not just a niche compliance vehicle.
He forced the entire global automotive industry to electrify by demonstrating that EVs could outperform gasoline cars in torque, speed, and safety. His application of first principles to battery and manufacturing costs, driving volume, allowed Tesla to scale rapidly despite massive industry skepticism.
And then there's SpaceX, achieving reusable orbital rockets after traditional aerospace experts called it mathematically and physically impossible.
The first principle question he asked for space was, what is the cost of the raw materials needed to build a rocket? It's only about 2% of the actual cost. The other 98% is bureaucracy, legacy systems, and the assumption that the equipment must be thrown away.
And he invested everything he had.
He did, surviving 3 consecutive rocket failures in 2008 that brought the company to the brink of bankruptcy.
Surviving that near-collapse moment is the ultimate proof of resilience.
It is. The goal remains audacious, making humanity a multiplanetary species by drastically reducing the cost of space access. That level of ambition demands extraordinary personal and organizational sacrifice. Musk is famously blunt about the cost. Nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week.
He demands and practices an 80 to 100-hour work week, often sleeping at the factories during production crunches, believing extraordinary achievements demand extraordinary effort.
Finally, we turn to Satya Nadella, who inherited a Microsoft suffering not from technological failure, but from a deeply fixed, toxic culture.
Microsoft in 2014 was arrogant, defensive, and internally political, a know-it-all culture stuck in the successes of the 1990s.
And Nadella understood the failure was cultural, not just strategic. His solution was a fundamental shift toward a learn-it-all culture and leading with empathy.
He strategically eliminated the infamous stack ranking system. Why was that so vital?
Stack ranking required managers to force a percentage of their employees into the lowest performance category, regardless of their actual performance. It created a toxic environment where employees actively sabotaged their colleagues to ensure their own survival.
By eliminating it, Nadella signaled a cultural pivot.
Right. That internal competition must be replaced by internal collaboration focused on the customer.
And that empathy pivot transformed their strategic relationship with the outside world, particularly regarding open source technology.
That was the biggest shift. Microsoft, under a previous CEO, had famously called Linux a cancer. Nadella needed to repair relationships with the crucial developer community who were flocking to open source and powering the rise of Amazon and Google Cloud.
And he embraced open source fully, the Microsoft loves Linux moment.
That strategic pivot, combined with his humble and empathetic leadership, allowed Azure to finally compete effectively with AWS, positioning Microsoft at the forefront of the cloud and AI revolutions and propelling the company to a multi-trillion-dollar valuation. He showed that cultural renewal is the foundation of strategic transformation.
So if we synthesize the lessons from these 10 complex, often flawed and extraordinarily successful leaders, what ties them together?
I think it's their superhuman determination and the clarity of their vision. They saw possibilities others missed, whether it was Henry Ford seeing his workers as future customers or Jeff Bezos seeing his internal IT costs as a future business model.
They weren't just managers. They were architects of systems. Systems for efficiency like Walton, for innovation like Coffin, for culture like Packard, and for experience like Jobs.
And every single one of them possessed the courage to bet their entire organizations or their personal fortunes on those unseen futures.
They proved that setbacks, Jobs being fired, Bezos near bankruptcy, Musk's rockets failing 3 times, Walton losing his first store, are not endings. They're tuition paid for future, greater success.
Their ultimate legacy wasn't the wealth they accumulated, but the enduring infrastructure and immense value they created. Ford's assembly line, Coffin's systematic R&D, Packard's organizational culture, Bezos's cloud infrastructure, these are the monuments they built.
They proved that one person with vision, courage, and determination really can change the American economic and technological landscape.
The final lesson for you, our listener, is that greatness doesn't require perfection. It requires relentless persistence. Their stories prove that the biggest obstacles are often the ones we place on ourselves by limiting our thinking about what's possible or by focusing on short-term fear instead of long-term regret.
What are you building today that might change the world tomorrow?
If you want more of this kind of videos, hit that subscribe button now. Thank you.